This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And I want to give a special thank you to Bill H., who just signed up this week to support us on Patreon. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so now let's get to our show. Hi, I'm David Barr Kirtley, author of the book Save Me Please and Other Stories, and welcome to episode 608 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the last 9 stories from the book The Best of Larry Niven. And those stories are Flatlander, The Borderland of Sol, The Magic Goes Away, A Teardrop Falls, The Return of William Proxmire, Limits, Smut Talk, The Missing Mass, and Cautionary Tales. And this will include spoilers for all of those stories, so just be aware of that. And this is a follow-up to our previous discussions of The Best of Larry Niven back in episodes 590 and 602, so definitely check those out if you missed them. And I'm joined today by my good friend Mercurio D. Rivera, making his 8th appearance on the show. He's the author of the short story collection Across the Event Horizon from Newcon Press, and his story Beyond the Tattered Veil of Stars recently appeared as a podcast from Dust Studios, featuring the voices of Jillian Jacobs from Community and Justin Kirk from Weeds. His first novel, Worgen, The Alien Love War, has been nominated for the Arthur C. Clarke Award. And now here's our interview with Mercurio D. Rivera. All right, so we're here with Mercurio D. Rivera. Welcome to the show.
Hey, David. Happy to be back.
Okay, and so the first story we're going to talk about in this batch is called Flatlander. And so this is a sequel to the story Neutron Star that we talked about in part 1. And so, again, we've got our hero, Beowulf Schaefer, and he's on a cruise ship kind of thing, and he meets this guy, Elephant. Beowulf Schaefer, he's going to visit Earth for the first time. He's never been to Earth before, and so he goes to Earth and kind of finds it a little bit overwhelming, and this guy, Elephant, has given him an invitation to stop by, so he decides he needs a native guide. And so he looks up Elephant, who turns out to be the wealthiest man in the galaxy. And Elephant is a little bit insecure because Earth is such a easy planet to survive on compared to all the other planets where humanity has spread to. People kind of look down a little bit on people from Earth. They call them Flatlanders. And, the implication is that they're a little bit soft, and Elephant doesn't like this. And so he wants a cool story he can tell about how he explored some dangerous thing in outer space to establish his cred as a serious space adventurer. And so he and Beowulf Schaefer go and contact these mysterious super advanced aliens called the Outsiders and ask them what would be the coolest, weirdest planet or something we could explore. And the Outsiders give them the location of this mysterious planet. And so they set off to go check it out. There's a lot more to the story than that, but that's the basic setup. So David, what did you think of Flatlander?
Well, I really enjoyed it. I love going back to the known universe stories, and the fact that we get to see cameos by the puppeteers, and we get to meet the Outsiders, who are these really weird aliens who look like, the way I envision them, they're sort of like squids, but their philosophy is that they are information brokers, and there's no haggling. They simply sell information to the people who are seeking it out, and so I like Beowulf Schaefer. I like that character, so I was glad to see him again. And I liked, interestingly, I thought that although for all of the sense of wonder in the story, what really elevated it, in my opinion, was the friendship between Beowulf and Elephant. I mean, they get very close on the ship. They become they say their goodbyes. They don't think they'll ever see each other again, but then they wind up meeting up again on Earth, where they continue their friendship, and then they go off on this adventure into space together, and they have their ups and downs, including a big dispute near the end of the story where they approach this unusual planet that's orbiting a proto-sun, and so it has very strange properties to it. They are analyzing how mysterious it is, and again, the outsiders have identified it as a cool, interesting planet to visit, an unusual place that would interest them. But all of a sudden, their hull disappears, and they're traveling in one of those puppeteer type ships that has an indestructible hull, and the hull disappears, and they're left flying in the remainder of the ship in these bubbles, remaining bubbles that remain intact, and have to decide whether to land on the planet. And interestingly, Elephant wants to continue his adventure and land on the planet, and Beowulf is the one who says, no, we need to get away from here. We don't know why the ship's hull has disappeared, and it's too dangerous. And that creates some incredible tension between the two of them, and they retreat. Only to find out later when they speak to the puppeteers and said, these are supposed to be indestructible hulls, and yet this happened. And the puppeteers reveal that the reason why the hull disappeared is because they were encountering a planet that was made of antimatter, and as such, they would have been destroyed had they landed on the planet. And again, this only seems to confirm Elephant's status as a Flatlander, because he doesn't understand the true dangers of outer space. So at the end, for all of his efforts, it's confirmed he really is a Flatlander. He's not. He really is. Doesn't get it. So I thought that was all very cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I said when we talked about Neutron Star that it's one of my all-time favorite science fiction stories, and I must have read this before, but I didn't remember it. But going back to it, I was like, this story is fantastic. This story is. I loved this story. Yeah. It's right up there with Neutron Star for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. I mean, there's three phases to the story. I like the first third of it is well, it's them on the ship just becoming friends, and then on Earth becoming friends and exploring Earth. And Earth itself is interesting with all of the nuances, the fact people all dye their skin and their hair all these weird colors, and there are sidewalks that carry people around, pedwalks they call them, where people pickpocket you, and it's almost just a matter of course. It's part of the society that you get pickpocketed if you're on the sidewalk on these things.
Yeah, actually, the pickpocket says to him, well, the Earth is so overpopulated that if we were going to try to enforce pickpocketing laws, it would just be chaos. So we don't even bother,
Yeah. So I thought all of that was interesting. That's the first third of the story. The second third is when they're on their ship and they go and they encounter the outsiders. And again, that's wonderful sense of wonder information that Niven is so good at. So I enjoyed that aspect of it too. Then the third part of the novella was this mystery of the planet that they're exploring, and all that goes on there. So I enjoyed all three parts. And by the way, I like very early on, Elephant defines what a Flatlander is. And this is a quote. He says, it's a schnook who never gets above the atmosphere. So I like that definition. And he obviously has a big chip on his shoulder about that. So overall, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the scene I definitely know that I've read this story before, because the scene that I definitely remember is they go to, the highways are all closed off or abandoned because there's flying cars and stuff. And so they have these sort of daredevil people who race old style internal combustion engine cars with steering wheels and brakes and everything. And Beowulf looks at this and he's like, wait a minute, these cars are not self-driving at all. It's just down to the steady hand of the driver, whether you die or not. This is crazy.
He's horrified.
Yeah, yeah, and I've always loved that people in the future would look back at driving cars, which we think of as normal, the way that we look at bloodletting or something like that. It's like so barbaric. How could people have ever done that? So yeah,
it's not so far-fetched. I mean, given where the direction we're heading in with driverless cars, that in 50 years from now, people could very well be looking back on it in that way.
No, yeah, I think that's almost certain to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, in some of the other known space stories, it develops that actually it becomes I think it becomes a capital crime to drive a car without the autopilot engaged. At least flying cars, it becomes a crime for sure to drive them without the autopilot. So yeah, and I could see things kind of going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But all the setting is just so vibrant, and it just makes you want to explore all these places when he talks about Wonderland and Jinx and We Made It and all these different planets and all these different cultures and everything. It's just so just so appealing and
yeah, no, I agree. The world build. I mean, when Niven is at his best, he does world building off the chart, and this is a good example of that.
I also liked that when Elephant is a nickname. The person's real name is Gregory Pelton, and there's these women, and they're sort of joking around with Beowulf, and they say, oh well, they sort of imply the reason Elephant got his nickname is because he's very well endowed. And Beowulf doesn't get it because he doesn't know what an elephant is. He's like, what's an elephant? Some kind of animal? And I just liked that detail too, that somebody from outer space, who's never been to Earth before, doesn't even know what an elephant is. Niven is good, I think, at capturing those sorts of, thinking in that sort of way, that sort of science fictional way of, people in the future won't have this knowledge that we take for granted.
That's really good, David, because I have to admit that went over my head. I was wondering why he kept harping on I thought it was an interesting joke. And I was like, why is he harping on this? And when they actually go see the elephant in the zoo, and I was like, okay, I get the joke, but why? And it's because of what you're saying, that Beowulf does not know what an elephant looks like.
Yeah.
So that's funny.
Yeah, so I thought that was really good. And then, all the stuff on Earth I really liked. And then also when they meet the outsiders, these aliens that they're buying this information from, it's just really, really cool. The outsiders are extremely alien. They live in these habitats with sort of spindle shapes that they all crawl up and down, and they lay their bodies, between the sun and the sunlight, and it's very dim sunlight, but the light and the darkness, and they generate electricity within their bodies from that. And it's just this really cool, really alien, hard science fiction. They're described, as you say, as sort of squid-like, or they're described as like cat o' nine tails, where they have these little spindly bodies and then all these legs or tentacles or whatever you would say. And so in the outsiders, they say, we'll charge you, 250,000 credits more. We'll tell you what's so special about this planet. And an elephant's like, no, we'll find out for ourselves, Yeah,
I think he so much wants to have an adventure that he doesn't want it spoiled by knowing what's so special about the planet. So he asks the outsiders, will we be able to discover this on our own? And they said yes. In that case, I don't need to know what it is. What's special. So that's interesting.
And we talked about when we talked about Neutron Star, we said one of the big problem with this story is that the central mystery is that the threat in this scenario is the tidal forces of this neutron star, and it's just not plausible that the characters can't figure this out. And so I thought that this story did a really good job of addressing that in a way, because in the previous story, in Neutron Star, you had these super advanced aliens, the puppeteers, who couldn't figure this out, and these scientists from the Scientific Institute who couldn't figure it out. Whereas in this story, you just have this space pilot and this tycoon. And so it's a lot more plausible that they don't immediately figure out that they're headed for an antimatter, a body made out of antimatter.
Yeah.
So this almost even improves on Neutron Star in some ways.
Yeah, I like too that there's helium life forms on the planet's surface, and I really wanted them to land. I agreed with the elephant. I was like, "Come on, land on the planet. I want to see what's going on there." But Beowulf is proven correct in his caution. So, so yeah, really a good addition to the known universe saga, for sure.
Yeah, known space.
Right, known space.
Yeah, I love it. I think I have no criticisms. I'm trying to think. Do you have any criticisms?
Just the usual. I almost don't want to say it. It's the way that the women are minor characters and the way they're treated on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But so be it. That's unfortunately it's almost part and parcel of this old science fiction from this time period.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I just love this story. And yeah, it's a Niven story, so there's some things that go along with that. But yeah, this as I said, this one is right up there with Neutron Star for me. And this is like just when I read science fiction, I want to read stories. I'm always hoping it'll be a story like this. This is just great stuff. This is why I read science fiction.
Yeah, when we started these last third of the book, I was like a little bit apprehensive that maybe the quality would go down. So it was nice to start off with this one because I think it was a very good one.
Yeah, and we've got one more Beowulf Schaefer story that we'll get to next. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, this particular story, I read that it was first published in the magazine If magazine, IF. Mm-hmm. And that same issue contained Harlan Ellison's story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty good issue.
Yeah. Wow. But there are 3 Beowulf Schaefer stories that we read for this, and we're going to talk about the third one in just a second, but they're all great in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like Larry Niven is really firing on all cylinders when he writes about Beowulf Schaefer, at least, based on the evidence of this book. But so yes, why don't we get to the next story? It's called The Borderland of Sol. And so in this story, Beowulf Schaefer is trying to get to Earth, and he can't get there. His flight was canceled because ships have been disappearing in the vicinity of Earth, and people are afraid to go there, disappearing for unknown reasons. And so he's sort of stuck on Jinx, and he runs into a genius scientist named Carlos Wu, who it turns out has actually contributed his DNA so that Beowulf Schaefer and his partner can have children. Beowulf Schaefer is forbidden from having children on Earth because he's an albino, and Earth has become, because it's so overpopulated, has become super strict about who's allowed to pass on their genes. So he runs into this guy, Carlos Wu. Oh, and also one of these children is Louis Wu, the main character from Ringworld.
Okay.
Yeah. He mentions there's 2 children, and one of them is named Louis. So that's
awesome! I didn't make that connection. That's great.
Yeah. So if you listen to our review of Ringworld, you'll know Louis Wu, and if you haven't, you could go check that out. But so it turns out that Carlos and another person we've seen before, the character Sigmund Ausfaller, who's a sort of UN intelligence operative, they're planning to go to Earth anyway, despite the threat. And they have a super tricked out spaceship that appears to be an ordinary cargo vessel, but has all sorts of weapons and armor. And so the thought is that they'll lure out whatever threat has been attacking ships, and they'll be able to handle it. And so they invite Beowulf to come along because he's a pilot and he's handy in dangerous situations. So that's the setup of The Borderland of Sol. So David, what did you think of this story?
I liked it a lot, and I thought it was actually reminiscent of a really good episode of The Expanse. I don't know if you made that connection, David, but it's mining asteroids in the outer solar system and the mystery of disappearing ships to solve. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It seemed very it's very outer spacey in a good way, like The Expanse, and interesting dynamics between Carlos Wu and Beowulf. Beowulf, by the way, I always forget that he's an albino, and as a result, because of that, he's not permitted a license to procreate, which is why Wu is his stand-in to have children for him. That was fascinating world building, and I like the return of this character from Neutron Star, the one who shrewdly put a bomb on Beowulf's ship so that he wouldn't run away. So it was great to see them back together and see them have to interact with one another in this story. I like the ship that they're flying called the Hobo Kelly is actually it's disguised as a passenger ship, but it's really a warship. Again, with one of those nearly invulnerable General Products hulls, and also it's loaded with tons of interesting gadgets and weapons, including something called a Sinclair molecule chain that can cut anything. It's a super thin wire that can cut anything. Again, I enjoyed it a lot. Interestingly, when they're approaching Earth, they're forced out of hyperdrive, and their engine disappears, and they're trying to solve the mystery of what caused the engine to disappear. And ultimately, Carlos Wu is smart enough to actually solve the mystery by just by theorizing on what it could be that could cause the engine to disappear. And he follows up with finding out which black hole experts exist in this or are located in this part of the solar system, tracking them down, and ultimately making contact with a guy named Dr. Julian Forward, who's a researcher who is working in one of these asteroids. So they interact with him, and that's where the adventure starts, because the guy he's the source of all of these problems. He's using mini black holes to capture the engines of ships and then pirating the ships. So great adventure, overall adventure. I really enjoyed the action when they have to battle Dr. Forward and his team. So good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, last time we talked about Larry Niven's story, The Whole Man, which neither of us were that excited about. Mm-hmm. But, he, in his author's note, Niven described how he and Jerry Pournelle had gone to meet with the scientist Robert Forward, who later became a science fiction author as well, who told them about quantum black holes, this idea of really small black holes. And Niven was determined to get into print with a science fiction story before Forward did or anybody else did. And so The Whole Man was one. But then he clearly wasn't done with the idea, because a year later he used it again in this story, The Borderland of Sol. I think the story is way better than The Whole Man. So I'm glad that he, returned to the idea. And the character, the villain in the story, Julian Forward, is obviously named after Robert Forward. So that's kind of funny. And actually, Julian Forward, the character, has a henchman named Harry Moskowitz, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to Sam Moskowitz, who was a major figure in early science fiction fandom. But yeah, like, this story is, this wasn't as good to me as Neutron Star or the one we just talked about, Flatlander.
Flatlander.
But it's up there. It's really, really good. It does definitely give me I was definitely having Expanse kind of, flashes as I was reading it. You're definitely right about that, which is good, because I love The Expanse. But yeah, all this stuff about kind of space piracy and asteroid mining. You said But I'll say, actually, so some research. So Hobo Kelly, the name of Sigmund Ausfaller's ship, is a reference to a TV show called Hobo Kelly and Her Puppets, which was a puppet show that aired in Los Angeles, I guess, when Larry Niven was young. So, so it's a kind of a deep cut there. But yeah, were you going to say something, David?
Just that I know that the story won the Hugo Award for Best Novelette in 1976. So it was well recognized at the time it came out. And also, interestingly, the villain in the story, Dr. Forward, he's using a device he calls the grabber, which is this big device that allows him to produce gravitational waves that he's hoping he can use to contact alien life forms, which again is interesting. Interesting science, given that this was written long before gravitational waves were actually confirmed to exist. I mean, I know theoretically that they were theorized to exist, but now we know for a fact that they exist. So I found that an interesting fact as well.
Yeah, the grabber is this kind of giant arm that sticks out of the asteroid base, and he can use it to move his quantum black hole around. And I guess he has these tugs too that he uses to put the quantum black hole into the paths of approaching hyperspace ships, which causes, I think the implication is the hyperdrive engine to keep going, but the rest of the ship to stop. So they end up with no engine, no hyperspace engine.
Yeah.
I guess one thing maybe that knocked a point or two off the story for me is I found the villain a little goofy. This idea that his the Institute or whatever had cut off his funding for black holes, so he had turned to space piracy to keep funding his research. I don't know, struck me as just a little silly. A little cartoon. He was a little bit cartoonish, I thought.
A little bit. I can see that. For me, what knocked off a couple of points was when the ship is stranded, they lose their engine. To me, there was less of a sense of urgency because they could make phone calls. So basically they're just floating around. They decide to call Earth, and they speak to Elephant to get the names of black hole researchers, and then they call Dr. Forward, and so it doesn't seem the fact that they're able to easily communicate removed a lot of the tension for me. And I wondered, why didn't they just call Earth to debrief Earth on what the heck was happening? That's important information to call and say, our engine just disappeared. So anyway, but
So you think he should have contrived it somehow so that they were cut off from communications?
I think so. Yeah, that would have raised the stakes a little bit or made it more suspenseful.
Yeah, I guess that's explained that they have something, if you're wondering how they're able to communicate from the edge of the solar system, they have something called hyperwave communication, which uses some sort of hyperspace relays like satellites to communicate, faster than radio waves would be able to.
Right. And a little bit of the science is outdated in that they attribute the Tunguska meteorite to a mini black hole. And I think nowadays it's pretty much explained as just the meteorite that caused all those trees in Siberia to collapse or disappear. Just the force of the meteorite itself. You don't need a mini black hole for that. So that was interesting. Maybe at the time that Niven wrote this, the Tunguska meteorite was still a mysterious event.
I actually looked into that a little bit. As near as I could tell, sort of the mainstream consensus has always been it was just a normal meteorite kind of blowing up in the atmosphere. But it was at least a sort of speculative possibility at the time that it might have been some exotic, antimatter or quantum black hole or something. So I think Niven was consciously just, choosing to go with the more interesting, hypothesis, even if it wasn't particularly, likely.
Right. But overall, again, I agree with you. I enjoyed it, and it was like I said, very good Expanse episode. So how can you go wrong with that?
The one part that was extremely tense for me is so they, so there's three people we mentioned on the ship, Carlos and Beowulf, and then this intelligence operative, Sigmund Ausfaller, and Forward, the villain, knows about two of them. So he's captured Carlos and Beowulf, and he doesn't know that Sigmund is still on the ship. But then once he realizes that, he sends his tugs to go destroy the ship, and they're going to destroy it with the quantum black hole that Sigmund has no way of knowing about, or no way of understanding what the danger is. And so it's this really tense moment. Is he sees that these unarmed tugs are approaching him. Is he just going to blow them up with no no guarantee that they have any way of harming him? And he does, which I thought was badass.
I love that part too. I loved it because they were saying there's no way he would just shoot up on a defenseless tug, and of course he does.
Yeah, because he's a badass secret agent. He knows something's not right about this situation, even if he doesn't know the science. But I was definitely really afraid for him when they were approaching him with this weapon that he has no way of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. So this story was pitched as the episode that was going to be aired in Star Trek the Animated Series. Niven wanted to turn this one into the episode, and that's DC Fontana thought it was a little bit too over the heads of viewers, so he went with the slave weapon. Is that the name of it?
Well, the story was the soft weapon. And
he went with the soft weapon instead of
the episode was, they renamed it the slaver weapon.
Yeah.
But yeah, another great story. As I said, not quite for me at the level of the previous two Beowulf Schaefer stories, but still totally top notch science fiction. I liked it. I don't have any serious issues with it, really.
No, not other than what we mentioned. I think it's a solid story.
Yep. Okay, so then we're going to move on to another story that is not a Beowulf Schaefer story. This is called The Magic Goes Away. This is a sequel to another story that we talked about in part 1 called Not Long Before the End. So this is a fantasy story. It's set in the past of Earth, when magic. The premise of this world is that every time you do magic, it kind of depletes the magical energy of the vicinity that you're in. And so the more people do magic, the less magic there is on Earth. And so over time, you've gone from the age of gods and mythical heroes and all this stuff through the age of like wizards and dragons and things like that. But the magic by this point in the story has been depleted enough that there's just a couple wizards left, and a lot of the mythological creatures have all gone extinct because their biology is partly magical. And so you have a gathering of some of the last remaining wizards talking about if there's anything they can do to arrest the total destruction of magic from the world. And so one of them has this crazy idea that, well, nobody's been to the moon before, so whatever magical energy is on the moon is still untapped. So all we have to do is figure out some way to pull the moon down to Earth, and then we can tap it for its magical energy, and it'll be a whole new golden age of magic again. And so they have this other sort of evil wizard who now exists only as a skull after I think they defeated him. This is a very long, very complicated story, so I might have some of the details wrong here. But I think in the past they defeated him, and now they kind of they animate his skull to help them out. And he knows of the location, what may be the location of the only god to still exist, who's kind of, in suspended animation, in a cave somewhere that nobody else knows about. And so they make a deal with him that if he leads them to this god who can hopefully help them pull down the moon, they'll try to resurrect his body so that he's not just a talking skull anymore. So there's a lot more going on, but that's the basics. It's
tremendous. I mean, you're right, David. It's really an epic fantasy novella. It's very long, and it's I thought it pulled me right in. I enjoyed it tremendously, and maybe it's because we've been immersed in science fiction with Niven. It's whenever he does fantasy, it's sort of a little bit of a cleansing of the palate in some ways, and seeing how seeing how he approaches fantasy, the logic that he uses in for his fantasy world, where magic is a non-renewable resource and it's running out. Again, great idea. But for me, a few years from now, when we think back on the story, what will stick out in my mind is that central image of the characters going mountain climbing in the clouds.
Yeah.
And it goes on for, it's a long stretch in the story, and it's phenomenal, where they use magic to travel through the clouds. So it's like they're hiking on this snow-covered mountain almost, only instead it's the clouds. And that sense of wonder is tremendous, and I'm sure it'll stick with me for many years to come. So that for me was
Yeah.
the best part of the story.
Well, when Niven says in his author's note that, he would often, as many of us have done, when he's on a plane and you're above the clouds, you just imagine, what would it be like to be able to get out of the plane and walk around on the tops of the clouds? I think everyone has probably imagined that. And he brings it to life incredibly well in this story. And one detail I really liked too was that, because, the ability to tap into magic is kind of spotty at this point, depending on where you are, that there's always the danger that the magic might abruptly cease to work and you would just fall through the clouds to your death. And one of these wizards has, I think all of them have used spells to make themselves, I think they're all hundreds of years old. Mm-hmm. And they've used spells to make themselves younger. But if their magic fails, then they start getting older again. And so one of the characters, her hair, at certain moments starts to turn white. And so one of the wizards, and there's also, I guess along with the wizards, there's a Greek soldier who was present at the destruction of Atlantis. That's a whole other subplot I completely forgot to mention. But anyway, so one of the wizards at one point tells this Greek soldier, "Well, keep an eye on her hair, and if it starts turning white, run, because that means we might fall through the clouds at any moment." So I really liked that detail.
Yes, and the fact that they're sleeping in the clouds, they're making love in the clouds. They're doing, and you're right, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, if this spell fails, it's going to be quite interesting. But the characters are, they're not particularly deep characters, but they're kind of archetypes. But I did find the skull was the most fascinating character. This necromancer, all that's left of him is a talking skull that they carry around like an amulet around somebody's neck. He carries around a skull that talks. So that character is really interesting. And I like the Greek swordsman, the one who's responsible for the death of Atlantis and the destruction of all those people. He's consumed by guilt, and that's what's driving him on this adventure. So I like that aspect of it. And there's a powerful witch, the one whose hair changes color. But she has a youth spell that's keeping her looking young. And there's the 200-year-old warlock. And lastly, that's this Clubfoot, a Native American shaman who's with them on their quest as well. So, and eventually they encounter an all-powerful ancient god called Rose Kati, the god of love and madness, he's the last living deity. He's basically lived petrified in this giant cave that's it's actually a mountain-sized snake. It's a snake that's turned to stone. They think it's a cave at first, but it's actually a giant mountain-sized snake, and it lives in there. And they have to resuscitate this god, bring him to life, and they want him to help them again pull down the moon so they can mine its magic. But then, the story takes an interesting twist at the end, where basically the fantasy runs straight ahead crashes into science, which is that the god reveals to them, well, you realize the moon is a giant spherical astronomical object that if you pull it down, it's going to destroy the Earth. And they say, oh, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. But the god thinks, no, I think it is a good idea because I'll be the only survivor and I can remake Earth in my image. So they're forced to fight the god and stop him from bringing the moon down to Earth. So all of that is, great adventurous stuff. So very, very entertaining. Nothing, like I said, nothing deep, but very imaginative and fun.
Yeah, so I enjoyed maybe the first half of the story, perfectly well. I don't think Niven, I mean, Niven is just not as good of a fantasy writer as he is a science fiction writer. And so, like stories like Neutron Star and Flatlander, I think are just top-notch science fiction. Whereas this, I feel like, there's just a lot of fantasy authors, I think, write fantasy better than this. But it was totally enjoyable to me. And the strength of the story, again, is Niven's world building, is this idea of magic as a non-renewable resource and what that would mean. He, explores those implications really, really well. But in terms of like the language and the characters and the overall kind of vibe, it doesn't have a really strong fantasy flavor to me. But like, yeah, up until they met Rose Kati, this last remaining god, I was enjoying the story a lot. And I had a hard time really getting into the story after that. I felt like it got kind of disjointed and a little bit hard to follow and a little sketchy. And I don't know, I kind of felt like maybe Niven was running out of steam toward the end. I mean, this, like, again, this is a really long story. It's the longest story in the book. So I definitely didn't enjoy, the second half of the story as much as I had enjoyed the walking around on the clouds and all of that.
Right. Well, that definitely was, I mean, the cloud walking was definitely the highlight of the story for me. And by the time the god is resuscitated and he starts growing and growing into this giant mammoth entity, I can see that it's less interesting. But I still enjoyed it, but it was less interesting.
There were also just a ton of scene breaks. There were so many scene breaks. I actually looked up trying to find out if maybe this Best of Larry Niven had a formatting error or something, where all these scene breaks just got added accidentally. Because it'll just be like the middle of a conversation. There'll be a scene break for absolutely no reason that I can see. And
I did notice that.
Yeah, apparently not. I mean, apparently this is the way Niven intended it, but yeah, I just thought there were way too many scene breaks, and especially, every time there's a scene break, you kind of have to reorient yourself as a reader because you don't know, have we jumped forward in time? Have we jumped to another location? Have we switched to a different point of view character? And so, just when there's like one or two every page for a while, yeah, it just again made the story feel really disjointed to me.
Yeah, I agree that some of those were unnecessary. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's worth definitely reading the first half again for the walking on the clouds sequence, which I did think was really well done. But yeah, overall, not one of my favorite stories. And I had liked Not Long Before the End as a fun sort of sword and sorcery kind of story with cool world building, but I think in that one Niven kept it short enough that it held my interest, whereas I think this one, it was just kind of dragged out a little too long and sort of definitely was losing my interest toward the end.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I liked it a little bit more than you, but again only because I love the idea that science comes crashing into the story at the end out of the blue. I mean, we've been in fantasy world and he's like, you know what, pulling the moon down to Earth is not going to work. And the explanation is wonderful. Where they realize all of a sudden these fantasy characters realize the true nature of the moon. So I like that.
Yeah, no, the ideas are really cool. And as we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, this actually sounds really cool. But I just didn't feel like the storytelling really, took full advantage of how cool the concepts were.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to our next story. This is called A Teardrop Falls. And so this was written for a book by Fred Saberhagen called Berserker Base, where he invited 6 of his science fiction writer friends to write stories set in his Berserker universe. And then he was going to write a bunch of kind of interstitial material to turn it into a cohesive novel-ish narrative. And so if you don't know the Berserker universe very quickly, is that A long time ago, there was a war between aliens, and one of the two sides built these berserkers to wipe out their enemies. These automated, killer spaceship things, the berserkers, to wipe out their enemies. And the berserkers wiped out their enemies, but then they malfunctioned or something and then wiped out the aliens who had created them in the first place, and now just roam the galaxy searching for any biological life to eradicate. And so that's the backstory. And in this particular story, in Niven's story, there's a man who's been uploaded into a computer, and he's overseeing a terraforming project. And he detects an incoming berserker ship that's coming to destroy him and all of his work and everything he knows. So he has to decide how he's going to handle this berserker attack. So David, what did you think of A Teardrop Falls?
I was unfamiliar with the berserker universe when I started reading this, but it didn't take long to get the gist of it, which is that there are these war machines that are out to destroy all life. And so I thought it was a solid story. I thought the prose was actually really very good. It was better written than a lot of the other stories in the collection, I thought. The ideas were just okay, I thought. The idea that this AI, this human who's been downloaded into a machine, rather, is he's prepared for this berserker attack, and he has a counter attack in the works that he pulls off, which is there's a sort of this counter programming that allows him to ultimately take over the berserker ship that attacks and get his vengeance in that way. So I like the way that the story ends on a note of vengeance, which was very good, because basically you have these two machine-like beings battling each other. And it ends with one of them the human-powered one, prevailing, and with a good, like I said, a nice sense of comeuppance and of vengeance realized that gives it a really good ending. So I thought it was solid.
Yeah, I liked the ending where, so it turns out that this berserker has 3 brains, basically, and then they kind of vote on what to do. And so this human character manages to copy himself, kind of overwrite 2 of the brains. So he's in charge of the berserker now, but the berserker mind is still kind of trapped. He can overrule it because he's got 2 brains to its 1. Mm-hmm. And so he gets his revenge by forcing it to listen to his poetry, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yes.
We find out at the beginning that he's sort of a frustrated poet, and is trying to prove that uploaded minds can still write great poetry, but he's not sure that he's really up to the challenge. So to have him inflicting his possibly not very good poetry on the berserker for all eternity, I thought was a pretty entertaining ending to the story.
Yes, and I like that the poem is very long. He's saying it goes on and on and on. There's no end to this poem.
I mean, I thought the story was okay. I mean, my big problem with it is that I just thought that the uploaded human intelligence overcame the berserker much too easily. There was no real tension or suspense or anything, really. He just kind of like, oh, here's what I'm going to do. And it's easy. There's no complications that crop up or anything like that. So that made the story feel to me sort of insubstantial. I thought that, there should have been, more that he asked to do to prevail in this situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the berserker does inflict terrible physical damage on the planet he's terraforming. He basically destroys it. But you're right, in terms of the counterattack, it was a little bit straightforward, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I did read Berserker Base as a teenager, and this story didn't stick out in my mind at all. There is another story in there by Roger Zelazny called Itself Surprised, which I haven't reread in a while, but I remember that one being quite good. So if you were going to read a story out of Berserker Base, I would definitely start with that one. This one again was just kind of okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So next story is called The Return of William Proxmire. And so apparently William Proxmire is a real figure, a real, Democratic senator who was very, against what he saw as excessive government spending. And I guess, kind of had the space program in his crosshairs for a long time, just seeing it as a big waste of money. And so in this story, which is kind of, there's an author's note where Niven talks about, how he didn't think that basically Gregory Benford reached out to him for a story for an anthology. And Niven said, the only story I have on this, the only idea I have on this topic is not saleable. It's just this kind of like joke story. And Gregory Benford said, well, send it to me anyway. I want to see it. And so Niven wrote it and sent it to him. But it is kind of a very like inside baseball, story for science fiction fans. But anyway, so the premise is that this the senator who wants to get rid of the space program, in his experience, all the scientists who work on the space program were all inspired by reading Robert Heinlein. So he thinks, if I were to go back in time and erase the influence of Robert Heinlein from history, then there would be no space program. And, Robert Heinlein had been in the Navy, but he had to leave because he developed tuberculosis. And so the senator's plan is he's going to go back in time with modern medicine and cure the young Heinlein's tuberculosis. So therefore he won't leave the Navy. So therefore he won't write science fiction and won't inspire all these scientists to go into the space program. So that's the story, the return of William Proxmire. So David, what did you think of the story?
I think that Niven should have stuck with his instincts and not written it. I thought it was pretty weak, and I thought precisely you used the word inside baseball. That's exactly what it is. It's a bunch of inside jokes for science fiction writers. There are two main jokes. One is that they're able to change the timeline by curing Heinlein's tuberculosis, and as such, the idea is there's two ideas. One is that all astrophysicists are inspired by Heinlein to become astrophysicists, which is silly, but it's an inside joke. And the other is that they're able to, by changing the timeline, what happens is all the science fiction magazines go out of business, but science fiction itself becomes mainstream. It appears in the New Yorker, and as such, science fiction is now considered to be highbrow type fiction that everybody loves, and it's more popular than ever. So that's what a twist. So again, it's all inside jokes that most people will not even get, I don't think. So pretty weak sauce.
Okay, well, I like this more than you did. And maybe there's a bit of nostalgia involved because the title didn't ring a bell for me at all, that we talked about last time. But as soon as I read the first paragraph of the story, I was like, oh, I remember the story, and I remembered everything that happened in it. And yeah, it's definitely only for science fiction fans. But as a science fiction fan, I kind of got a kick out of it. My parents are scientists, and I grew up around a lot of scientists, and I certainly did meet a lot of scientists who were inspired to go into science by reading Robert Heinlein. So, it's exaggerated, but is not, totally off base. And the story, it's a pretty simple kind of story where, so the senator tries to, change the timeline and ends up making the space program like 100 times bigger than it ever was before. And now there's like solar satellites, and I forget all sorts of other, there's a lunar base maybe, or there's all sorts of stuff like that.
I think that we'll end up exploring Mars as well. Things progress differently in a way they weren't anticipating.
Mm. So I don't know. I find it funny and kind of charming. And in his author's note, Niven says that he wrote the story, and I think he said he had a blast writing it and sent it to all his friends and sent it to Heinlein, and Heinlein ended up dying, I think like a couple weeks later, something like that. So
Yeah.
he was glad that he had gotten the chance to show it to him while he was still around to enjoy it.
Definitely kind of. I like that. It's certainly sweet that he wrote the story and that Heinlein was flattered by it and so forth. But just judging the story based on the story, it doesn't. It just doesn't work for me. It's just like I said. It's science. I'm not sure science fiction fans would even get these jokes about science fiction. Now being like lit fiction, and that's a very science fiction writer type joke.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know if science fiction fans would understand that joke. But anyway.
Well. So for example, like I might get the details wrong, but he says something like, Philip Roth. Wait, there's a novel called Selig's Complaint, or maybe was it? I forget. Somehow he conflates Robert Silverberg and Philip Roth, and so instead of writing Dying Inside, Silverberg wrote Portnoy's Complaint, basically, but it's the science fiction thing. I don't know. Yeah, it gets very very obscure, if you're not really into, science fiction, particularly older science fiction and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. But it's definitely, I mean, I don't know if you look, there's this review of The Best of Larry Niven that was on Strange Horizons, and the reviewer hates this story. I mean, I forget, I should have written down the quote, but he calls it like execrable something, so I think it's definitely a polarizing story, I guess, which we see here, but I thought it was funny. But
even Senator William Proxmire, I looked him up because he's an old politician. I didn't realize that he was into cost cutting and that he viewed the space program as the main culprit of exorbitant spending. So without that knowledge, again, you're missing a lot of the context of the story if you don't know that.
Well, but you don't have to. I mean, I read this as a kid and got the gist of it. I didn't know that he was a real person, but it's like explained within the story that he thinks the space program is a waste of money and all this stuff. So I think you can basically get what's going on in the story, even if you don't have all the context for it.
Right.
But yeah, definitely not for everybody.
Hey, yeah, your mileage may vary.
Yeah. I guess I do just kind of like the idea that science fiction writers are so have so much impact on the world, even if that's kind of a fantasy. It's just sort of an enjoyable fantasy for me to live with, at least for the space of one short story.
I get that.
All right. So next we're going to talk about, there's actually 3 stories in this book that are set in the Draco's Tavern universe. And so all of these stories are set at a bar. There's a character, Rick Schumann, is this bartender, and he opens this bar in Siberia near where some super advanced aliens called the Chirp Sithra landed. Where they sort of landed and established a spaceport where all these different aliens from all over the galaxy come and hang out, sort of like a Mos Eisley Cantina kind of vibe. But so there's this bar. Yeah, there's this bar in Siberia, and every story, I think there's like dozens of them. There's 3 of them in this book. I think all the stories basically involve Rick kind of hanging out with aliens, listening to their odd musings and, musings on philosophy and science and stuff like that. So the first of these we're going to talk about is called Limits. And so in this story, Rick overhears, and all of these stories are quite short. I mean, I think sort of on the order of 5 pages or so. But so anyway, so in this story Limits, Rick, he has some sort of, like software to dampen the noise of all these different aliens speaking all these different languages. And somehow as a result of this software, he's able to hone in on this particular conversation, without knowing which aliens are having this conversation. But so he overhears this conversation where these aliens are talking about how humans being mortal, most other aliens we gather in this universe have achieved immortality. But humans being mortal have this like special drive to explore and invent and, and have this just spark. And the aliens really like this, and they've found out that another alien has come and is going to be peddling the secret to immortality to humans, and these aliens don't want that to happen because they don't want humans to lose this special spark. So they're kind of conspiring to keep us mortal. And so Rick, when he overhears this, is horrified, but he can't figure out which aliens were having this conversation, and they leave the bar without him being able to stop them. So apparently humanity will never get the secret to immortality, at least not on this occasion. So David, what did you think of Limits?
I really enjoyed it, and I think that what makes these Draco Tavern stories work, generally speaking, is the fact that they're little shorts, they're little flash stories, I guess. So they're the perfect length, because again, it's usually exploring one central philosophical idea, and it just you have this wonderful, Star Wars Cantina vibe with all these various aliens talking, and I like the idea that the aliens, when they see humanity, they define us as, well, they say humanity defines everything in terms of limits. There's the limit of the speed of light. There's limits on the strength of metals or crystals, and there's time limits. Everything is, humanity seems to see things through the prism of limitations. And so I thought that was an interesting point. And then when he overhears this conversation and realizes that they're discussing about possible technology that can allow humanity to stay young, and then he gets mixed up. He doesn't know who's having the conversation. There's so many aliens around him. He doesn't know who's doing the talking about this conversation. So the story ends with him looking around and seeing only limits in terms of determining who's having this conversation. So I thought that was a very cool ending, and I like that vibe of the bar. And you know what? I think I actually put a little sticky here on the first page of Limits, just because I wanted to read just 3 or 4 sentences. It says, the Draco Tavern used to make the Tower of Babel sound like a monologue. In the years before I got the sound system worked out. Picture it. 30 or 40 creatures of a dozen species, including human, all talking at once at every pitch and volume, and all of their translating widgets bellowing too. Some species, like the Srivinthshish, don't talk with sounds, but they also don't notice the continual shrieking from their spiracles. Others sing, they call it singing, and they say it's a religious rite. So how can I stop them? But anyway, it goes on, but I just think that's fabulous. So I enjoyed Limits.
Yeah, I really liked the basic idea of these Draco's Tavern stories of the bartender interacting with these weird aliens. It was making me think of the story we read. I think it was in part 1, the fourth profession.
Yes, the fourth profession, or the fifth, whatever number it was. Yes.
So I can't help seeing that as kind of a proto Draco's Tavern story, because again, in that when you have the bartender, and the aliens come in and everything. I mean, and I in general, I like really short stories that are, short and to the point. And as I was reading these Draco's Tavern stories, I found them enjoyable, and I thought the ideas were interesting and everything. I did, as I was putting my notes together for this panel, realize that I could not really remember what happened in any of these Draco's Tavern stories, even though I just read them like a couple days ago. Right. So that kind of
basically the same. It's basically the same story almost. It's just they're talking about a different philosophical point. That's probably why.
Yeah. So that kind of dampens my enthusiasm somewhat. Just realizing how quickly they had popped in and out of my brain. Although I was intrigued enough to maybe want to read. There is a book called Draco's Tavern that collects. There's something like 26 of them. So I could see that being pretty interesting. I would imagine that's sort of like, a cornucopia of interesting ideas. But I think individually the stories, for whatever reason, just don't really stick with me. And, I think there's just not really a strong plot. I mean, I think this one has probably a little bit stronger plot than the other two. But in general, like the Rick Schumann character doesn't really do anything in these stories for the most part. He's just kind of there listening to these aliens talking. So unusually for me, I'm going to say I wish that these were a little longer. Not a lot longer, but a little longer, and that Rick had a little bit more of an active role in the story. And because we've talked about how Larry Niven's not always the strongest on endings. And I feel like when you have a story that's 4 or 5 pages, you really need to knock the ending out of the park, because it's so much of the effect of the story depends on the ending when the story is that short.
Yeah.
So,
but for this one, I thought he actually ended it pretty well. I like that. I like the he's looking around. He's kind of frustrated, and he again is thinking in terms of limitations, which I calls back to the earlier reference to the way the aliens look at humanity as being bound by limitations. So I liked the ending for this one, and for me, I think that if they were longer, I might not enjoy them as much. I like the fact that it's just kind of in and out quickly. They're when you have a flash piece, it's oftentimes more about just an idea rather than plot, and that's why it's probably, in my view, just better to just get in and out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that we have some different takes on these stories. I mean, I definitely found the ending of this one it felt just a little, it just felt abrupt to me, and I wanted something. I just wanted Rick to do do
something. You wanted a plot, and there's these stories. They don't have plots. That's true.
I mean,
except maybe the next one, the Smut Talk, maybe has some plot, but we'll get to that one.
Yeah, but I mean, and I had problems with the Fourth Profession. I thought it got too long and too complicated, but I feel like maybe something a little sort of in between the two. These are a little too short, and that one was too long. But maybe just
right.
There would be, for my personal taste, there would be a happy medium somewhere in between the two.
Right.
But yeah, so let's get into Smut Talk. So this was published in Playboy originally, which may explain some of what I'm about to describe.
All right.
But so basically you have a bunch of aliens sitting around in this bar talking about their respective sexual practices, which obviously differ wildly. So for example, you have these spider-like aliens where it's normal for the female to bite off the heads of the males after sex, sort of Black Widow style. And then there's this discussion of, well, couldn't you just stuff a roast ham in her mouth or something, So it's kind of funny. And then Rick, the bartender, has kind of had the flu this whole time. But then about midway through the story, it turns out that it is not actually the flu, that actually one of these aliens has been going around kind of spiking everyone's drinks with some sentient alien virus, which is now in Rick's head, kind of taking over his mind, like existing as a separate consciousness inside his mind and trying to take over his body. And also in the bar is a human bacteriologist. Is that the right title? And
she was was she a xenobiologist?
Xenobiologist, yeah, something like that.
Somebody
who studies viruses. And so when he finds out that he has this alien virus in his mind, I think it's her, right? She threatens basically to, wipe out the virus unless it behaves itself. And so as a show of goodwill, it kind of cures all his joint problems and stuff like that. And then at the end, this female, what is xenobiologist? What did we decide? Xenobiologist?
Xenobiologist. Yeah.
Basically says to Rick, I want to have sex with you because I want to be infected with the virus too, because this is my whole career is studying these things. So they're going to have sex at the end of the story.
Right.
So that is Smut Talk. So David, what did you think of Smut Talk?
I think what she says is rather than she didn't like the word infected, she said I prefer to be colonized. I thought it was it was a fun read. It was perfect for the market, I guess. All of this weird talk about different sex practices of the alien beings at the bar. I thought it was interesting that when Rick is talking about human sexuality, that all of a sudden he loses all of all the imagination of the author disappears. When he's talking about the aliens it's amazingly imaginative, all the different ways that they mate. There's cannibalism, there's all sorts of there's bacterial colonies. But when he describes humanity, he says, well, basically it's one man and one woman, and that's about it. This doesn't really address polygamy or asexuality, and they do ask about homosexuality, and he kind of tosses it in the same bucket as bestiality and pedophilia, kind of just frowned upon activities. So it's a shame that there wasn't more imagination when describing the human sexuality versus the aliens' sexuality. But look, it was a fun read. It was good for the Playboy market. Nothing striking particularly, but just it was fun. It was fun. That's all I'd have to say.
Yeah, and again, it was only 4 pages or something. But yeah. I found when the alien virus comes in, it seemed really kind of out of left field to me. Mm-hmm. And he had set up that Rick was sick, but I don't know. I felt like it could have used some more foreshadowing.
I had to read it twice to follow that. I also was confused when the alien colony, bacterial colony, showed up in his brain.
And then again, like Rick doesn't really do anything in this story. The aliens tell him stuff, and then the xenobiologist character is kind of the active character who actually does stuff to negotiate with the with the alien virus and stuff. So yeah, so he's just kind of along for the ride. So yeah, again, probably as I would feel about all these Draco's Tavern stories, I wish it was a little longer and that Rick just had more to do, and maybe the ending was a little bit more, there was a little bit more drama or a little bit more making a big choice, or just kind of standard storytelling 101 kind of stuff.
Yeah, this one didn't. It was okay. I didn't think it was anything special.
Yeah.
I did, like I said, I did like the weird alien sex practices, but that was fine. Mm-hmm. You can't go wrong with that.
All right. Well, why don't we bring in the third Draco's Tavern story here that we read, The Missing Mass. So in this one, there's a human named Tung Hui and some sort of beaver-like alien named Beaver. And they've been talking online about astrophysics and stuff, and meet up at this bar. And so sort of as background, in science, there's this issue that the universe as we observe it seems to act as if there should be more mass. Like the way that objects move, stars and everything, galaxies move, would make you think that there's more mass than we can actually find, which has led to the speculation about dark matter, that there must be all this matter that we somehow can't observe that's affecting gravity. And so this beaver and this man are kind of talking about that. And the beaver has this theory that these super advanced aliens, the Chirp Sithra, so they're known to have a drive for propelling their spaceships that nobody understands how it works. And so Beaver speculates that they're somehow able to take advantage of the fact that empty vacuum in outer space consists of particles kind of popping in and out of existence all the time. They're somehow able to take advantage of that to power their spaceships, to sort of pull power from empty vacuum. This is going to be kind of a long explanation, by the way, even though this story is like 8 pages long. But so anyway, so there's this speculation that the Chirpsithra have ships powered in that way, and that this is somehow causing like space to shrink in a way that's affecting gravity in a way that explains the observed phenomena that could otherwise be explained by the existence of dark matter. So that's the Beaver's take on things. And so then a Chirpsithra, one of these super advanced aliens, joins the conversation and explains, well, no, actually the reason that dark matter, the sort of dark matter phenomenon happens is because actually there are these beings called the Firstborn who are like bigger than galaxies. And here's a picture of one. You haven't seen them because your telescopes aren't powerful enough. Like the more powerful your telescope is, the farther you're looking into space. And because of the way light travels, you're effectively looking back in time. So the Chirpsithra have super powerful telescopes, so they're able to see these Firstborn when we haven't. And the Chirpsithra says, here's a picture of one. We've never been able to find them, but if we could ever find them or figure them out, that would just be amazing. Maybe you younger races will succeed where we've failed. And this really excites the human scientist, Tung Hui. But Beaver is skeptical, and he thinks that this whole thing about the Firstborn is just a way to deflect blame from the Chirpsithra for screwing up gravity with their spaceship engines that pull power from vacuum. As you might imagine, I did not remember all those details from a casual reading and had to go back. I didn't have time to reread the story, but I kind of tried to skim through it and pluck out the relevant details. I might have some of them wrong. That's my understanding of the story at present. So, David, anything you want to add on that?
Just, I'm glad you summarized it because a lot of those details I've forgotten about. But I like the idea that, again, it's a Draco Tavern story, so nothing too deep going on. They're just trying to solve a cosmic mystery of dark matter. What is it? And there's some banter back and forth. And could it be this Firstborn? Could it be these, miles wide ships that are being used by the Chirpsithra? Could it be, and there's some musings back and forth, and that's pretty much the gist of the story. It's the sense of wonder of, the state of the cosmos and what's causing it. And that's the gist of the story. It was fine. I didn't think it was as good as the other two that we read. Actually, I like this one second best. I liked Limits best, and then followed by Smut Talk, and then this one was just fine. Nothing profound point. And I prefer a short piece that's about human frailty or some sort of existential question about humanity rather than some cosmic phenomenon. But so it was okay.
Yeah, I don't think I even mentioned Rick in that plot synopsis, even though he's the main character. But he doesn't. Again, he's just there to listen to the aliens. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but just for me personally, if Niven could find some way to make to use Rick to kind of give some human stakes to this alien philosophizing and theorizing. I think that's what would work best for me in these Draco's Tavern stories, rather than, again, just using Rick as kind of a camera to record what the aliens, who are the real characters, are doing.
By the way, this was published in 2000, and it was an interesting use of email addresses. They almost seemed futuristic and high tech. That if you have an email address, it was portrayed as somewhat futuristic. That these aliens have email addresses. Well, that was interesting. Actually,
literally just before we got on the call here, I remembered that there was some line about Helmuth. So one of the characters, his email address is helmuthdip at something or other, and Niven mentions that this is a reference to something in early science fiction. So I was like, oh, I should Google that because I did not immediately catch the reference, but apparently Helmuth is the primary antagonist in the Lensman novels by E. Doc Smith, and he commands a network of space pirates called the Boscone. And so the Boston area science fiction convention Boscone is a like pun / reference to that.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, I thought all the stuff I described just a moment ago about the alien drive and the and all the rest of it. I won't try to go through it again. Was cool. I just think it maybe, it was I thought actually good enough that it deserved a little bit more in-depth treatment, or to be placed within the context of a slightly more developed plot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like again, when you're doing a really short piece of fiction like this, it's got to create a sense. It's got to create a strong feeling in the reader, and not just discuss an interesting idea. To me, it's got to affect me emotionally in some way. This one didn't do that. It was just a sort of an interesting intellectual exercise.
Yeah, so I kind of got the sense reading these that maybe at this stage in his career, Niven was just well known enough that he, could kind of sketch out a scenario and sell it on the strength of his name, and didn't have to do all the heavy lifting of character and plot and everything. I won't belabor the point, but yeah, these were just a little too short and sketchy for me, and usually the shorter the better for me. So, but in this case, I wanted more development.
Our last story, David, I thought it was a Draco Tavern story at first when I was writing my notes up, but I didn't realize that it's not.
Yeah, you would certainly think so. I mean, I think the difference is that it's not in Siberia; it's out in outer space. But otherwise, it has all the hallmarks of a Draco's Tavern story, which is why I wanted to discuss it here. Because I think it makes sense to situate it within the context of the Draco's Tavern stories. Yeah. But so our final story we're going to talk about is called Cautionary Tales. And again, this is, it's like 3 or 4 pages long. But so the premise is that there's a human and he's just been voyaging around the galaxy trying to see if any aliens anywhere have discovered the secret to immortality. And so he's in some, outpost, some alien outpost or something. And he runs into an alien who has also been on a quest to see if anyone has discovered the secret to immortality. And he's gone all these places, and he's tried different, like faster than light ships to see if that would do anything, or but nothing. He's gone everywhere and tried everything, and nothing has worked. And then the sort of the twist at the end is it turns out that this alien is actually 100,000 years old. And so our main character, Gordon, kind of has a change. Once he hears this, he sort of has a change of heart where he's like, well, geez, if even 100,000 years of searching for immortality hasn't made you happy, it's probably not a good idea for me to spend the few years I have remaining as a human in the same way. So I'm going to, totally change my life and try to find meaning in some other way. So David, what do you think of Cautionary Tales?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was almost like a counterpoint to The Limits, which was the Draco Tavern story, because they're both stories about immortality. But in Cautionary Tales, the alien and the human are discussing all of these different theories of how to find the secrets of immortality, the fountain of youth idea. They're exploring all of these different alien approaches to trying to seek out immortality in some way. And then ultimately, yes, when he learns that the alien is so old and that he's pretty much, abandoned the idea of living his life and is completely obsessed with just finding immortality. That, without saying, fortunately, the protag doesn't say this out loud or even think it out loud. He hears this and says, all right, I think, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home and just live my life. Thank you. And I like that there's a profound lesson about, maybe not so profound, but there's a lesson about some perspective about life and death. And the story is, I like the story because it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's short, and it makes the counterpoint to limits. And limits, the character is looking around the tavern trying to find out. He missed the secret to immortality because he doesn't know who spoke those words about the technology. So Strahan actually put them back to back. I realize in the book. Maybe for
The
that.
editor of the book, if that's not.
Yeah, Jonathan Strahan, yeah, the editor, put them back to back. But I enjoyed this one. Maybe a little bit more than the Draco Tavern stories, even though it is sort of a Draco Tavern story.
Yeah, I really liked this. It's funny because my wife was teaching a creative writing class this past semester, and she'd asked she did one day on science fiction, and she'd asked me to recommend some science fiction stories that were under 3,000 words. And it was actually really hard finding anything, that I thought was good for an audience of college students who've maybe never read science fiction before that's under 3,000 words. But this is one, I would maybe recommend. Because it is really short, but I thought it had more of an emotional impact for me at the end. I mean, and it's not a Draco's Tavern story, but it feels like it. But I think actually it works better for me not being a Draco's Tavern story because rather than having the Rick Schumann character just sort of observing things and then not really doing anything at the end, the main character Gordon makes this big decision at the end.
Right.
So the story had more of an emotional impact for me, being focused on the character who really has something emotionally at stake and really makes an important decision at the end of the story.
Yeah, I agree that this definitely had more of an emotional impact than the other stories. And I like that, again, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It makes its point, and he packs up and he packs it up, just goes home. Just hearing the age of the alien was enough to do the trick to convince him that he's been wasting his time to just go home and live life.
Yeah, so I really liked it. I thought it was a great little science fiction parable. Yeah, and again, it's like 3 or 4 pages, so read it. Why what have you got to lose? It takes a couple minutes.
Yeah, and as you say, it's tough to pull off at that length.
Mm-hmm.
So well done, Mr. Niven.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all of our stories. So last time that David and I spoke, we were talking about how we're going to list our top 5. Now that we've read every story in this book, in this Best of Larry Niven book, we're going to give our top 5. So David, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start. First? You want me to start with my number 5?
How about start with 3, 4, and 5?
3, 4, and 5. Okay, my number 3 is probably is Bordered in Black, which again, it stuck with me. A lot of these stories, they may come and go, and some of them just stick in your mind. This one will stick in my mind. The idea of these, and again, the idea is it's these cannibalistic aliens who are. You come to learn that this continent that's bordered in black, it has a black outline, consists of these aliens who are cannibalizing each other, and there's a number of shocks along the lines of To Serve Man in the Twilight Zone or Soylent Green as People. These aliens are they're giant cannibals who are actually livestock themselves, being maintained by aliens as a future food source. So all of that is just weird, creepy, horrible science fiction horror. So that would be my number 3 pick. Yeah,
it's a great story. It's actually my number 5, so definitely on my list. And yeah, I think definitely the best example we read of Niven combining horror and science fiction.
Definitely.
Okay, what else we got?
Number 4, this is one that I think I like more than you did, which was Rammer.
I had a feeling you were going to have Rammer.
Yeah. I mean, I just love a good revenge comeuppance story, and I love that our protag is resuscitated. He's was corpse. He's brought back to life, and then he's pretty much tortured by society, and ultimately he he gets his revenge on his tormentors and escapes off into space with their spaceship. So I love the world building. I loved again the I love just the way it's very plot driven, and but also again I felt really good when the story ended. So that made it number 4 on my list.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to like in Rammer. I mean, again, I just had a huge stumbling block with how easily the main character was able to steal the ship and escape at the end. But it's a really strong story overall. I definitely would recommend it. My number 4 is a story I'm sure is not on your list, but is The Defenseless Dead. Longtime favorite of mine. Possibly there's some nostalgia at work there, but I just love the story so much. This is about the policeman in the future who is tracking criminals who kidnap people and disassemble them for their organs and sell them on the black market. I just love all those Gil Hamilton stories, and this is the one that we got in this book, so it was definitely in my top 5.
Yeah, that's I love that whole setting, that whole world that he creates of these corpses that are being resuscitated and mined for different purposes, organ harvesting or whatever the case may be.
But it's not in your top 5.
No, it's not.
Yeah. All right. So what's your number 5?
Number 5 is Flatlander, which we discussed in today's show. I just thought it was. It has all the hallmarks of classic Niven, the world building, the adventure. For all the reasons we discussed today, I put it at number 5 on my list.
Yeah, I loved it as well. I have it at number 3 on my list. So yeah, Bordered in Black and Flatlander, we both have in common there.
Right. All
right, how about number 2?
Number 2, I have Neutron Star. Again, because it's the introduction of the known space stories. The cowardly alien puppeteers, the indestructible hull ships, all of that, is the world building is off the charts. Even though it's at the end the big reveal about the weakness of the ship being just tidal forces, that doesn't hold up. But even in spite of that, the world building is so off the charts that it made number 2 on my list.
Yeah, totally agree. I have Neutron Star number 1. Even with all the issues that we talked about, I just love it so much. Definitely number 1 for me.
Yep. And I think I know what your number 2 is. You know what my number 1 is.
Yeah.
It's Inconstant Moon, which again, it asks a question that we can all relate to, which is what if you knew that tomorrow was going to be the end of everything, and how would you spend your final night on Earth? And in this case, our protagonist spends the night painting the town with his lady friends. It was, I found it powerful and affecting, and it's ironic that Larry Niven's best story, in my opinion, is a love story, because that's not something he's known for. So I thought it was just relatable and
yeah, a love story and kind of a character study as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why it's my number 1.
Yeah, Inconstant Moon is fantastic. I just absolutely love it. So again, for those at home, my top 5 are Neutron Star, Inconstant Moon, Flatlander, The Defenseless Dead, and Bordered in Black. And David, do you want to just read your list quickly?
Yeah, number 1 was Inconstant Moon, number 2 Neutron Star, number 3 Bordered in Black, number 4 Rammer, and number 5 Flatlander.
Yeah, and then also my kind of honorable mentions could easily have made the list. The Soft Weapon and the Borderland of Sol, I really liked as well. So
I struggled with leaving the Soft Weapon off, but I think it was almost my number 5. But I just thought that Flatlander was a little better, and I thought that our discussion was better for the Soft Weapon. It was more fun because we talked about the animated series episode and all that, so I didn't want to confuse our discussion, which was terrific, versus the story itself.
Yeah, but so all these stories that we've just mentioned here, I would just give my strongest possible recommendation. They're all fantastic. Again, this is the kind of stuff that, when I pick up a science fiction story, I'm hoping it's going to be something like one of these. And if you've never read Larry Niven before, I would definitely start with the however 9 or so stories that we just mentioned. You can't go wrong with any of those, in my opinion.
I agree. And if you like Sense of Wonder, this will be right up your alley.
Yep. Okay, so I guess we're all done with the best of Larry Niven. It's a little sad.
There's a ton more work of his that we have not covered.
I guess Larry Niven has written a few more things that we haven't talked about yet. So yeah. I mean, like I said, reading the Draco's Tavern stories, even though individually I thought that they should have been more developed, I could definitely see reading, 24 of them all at a stretch would again just be this smorgasbord of cool ideas. So it did make me curious to read that. I mean we've said before, but I have very fond memories of the Mote in God's Eye and the Legacy of Hierot. Those are collaborations, but I remember those being really good. I mean, I've heard people have said, we gave a very lukewarm review to Ringworld, but I've had some listeners tell me that the sequel, The Ringworld Engineers, is actually stronger. So, there's a bunch of Larry Niven I'd definitely be interested in checking out. Yeah,
well, it was fun.
All right, cool. So, I'm sure we'll be back at some point with more Larry Niven. Hope everyone has enjoyed our exhaustive review of this massive Best of Larry Niven book. But I think for now we'll wrap things up there. So so we've been speaking with Mercurio D. Rivera about the Best of Larry Niven. So David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David. It was a blast.
And that was our interview. So big thanks again to Mercurio D. Rivera for joining us on the show. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoyed the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.